A very good evening to all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 18th JGU Alumni webinar on the topic of health laws in India, policy, practice, and implementation by a distinguished alumnus, Mr. Vivekanand Jha. I'm Professor Shireen Moti, Assistant Professor of Law and Director of Alumni Relations at OP Jindal Global University. The OP Jindal Global University was started in the year 2009 under the visionary leadership of our Chancellor, Mr. Naveen Jindal, and our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar. In a span of a decade, JGU has been recognized as an institute of eminence, and JGLS has been ranked as the #1 law school in India by QS World Rankings. Before I invite our speaker for today, I would like to introduce him briefly. Mr. Vivekanand Jha graduated with a Master in Public Policy degree from Jindal School of Government and Public Policy in 2019. Soon after, he started his career as a researcher in the health policy domain with IIT Madras. He has the experience of dealing with matters in the area of health policy, healthcare system, and healthcare financing. Mr. Vivekanand Jha has multiple views about the healthcare sector in this country. He believes that the public healthcare system has been ignored historically and has not received much importance from the policymakers. The public healthcare system has not met the demands of the poor and vulnerable sections of the society. COVID-19 has further exposed the shortcomings of the current public health system, which is extremely fragile. During the webinar, Mr. Jha will be discussing the potential impact of COVID-19 on nutrition and recommend the ways in which the government should deal with the issues in the public health system post-COVID-19 to prevent another health crisis in India and the world. With this, I welcome Mr. Vivekanand Jha.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to thanks Alumni Relation Office and a special thanks to Professor Shireen Moti to inviting me here. And it is my privilege, to speak about my area of domain where I was working and I am currently working. So I welcome all of you who have attended, this and will be joining later. And I also believe that you all are safe and well in this time. And yeah, I am looking forward to have this conversation in very meaningful way and meaningful question and answer session. So yeah, ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Vivekanand, for gracing us with your presence. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. We are delighted to have this opportunity to engage with you on such an important topic, and we cannot wait to hear your views in your area of expertise. But before we jump into the substantive area of our discussion today, it would be great to know your journey so far and how did you end up doing what you're doing currently. So there are a few introductory questions that I would like to ask you before we understand your current roles and responsibilities and how you went about doing them. So how and when did you decide to pursue a career in public policy? That would be interesting for us to know.
Yeah, so thanks for the very interesting question. So there are three dimensions of it. First dimension, my own personal experience, which I have seen in my family and the communities around me. I particularly belong to a rural part of Bihar. So I have seen especially how people are struggling to get quality healthcare and access to healthcare. And I have my own experience. I have seen how my, I'm sorry, I'm bringing my personal issue here.
No, please go ahead.
How my sister have suffered due to miscarriage twice because of untrained doctors and professionals. So that that is still in my mind, that one of the dimension to pursue my career here. And second, when I was doing UG economics from Loyola College, so I had a chance to visit the slums. So, and that program was called outreach, and which was compulsory for every student. So we had been allotted particular slum, and we have been divided in particular group. So I was the co-leader of women and empowerment team. So I closely watched in that slum. I closely watched the the health, especially health issues that women are facing, and other issues also I have seen. But mainly I was focusing on health. So that also, motivated and encouraged me to go deeper into this, field. In third and last dimension, when I was doing my intern with Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi, under Dr. Tiwari, so I was doing research and writing on two topics, Manrega and gender equity, and the state which has been affected by left wing. So when I was reading and writing the reports, I have seen that people are struggling to get even basic amenities. Forget about the access to health and access to education. They were struggling to get even safe and potable drinking water. So these three dimension encouraged and motivated me to go deeper and deeper and do at least something for them. So yeah, so these three dimensions are the say pillars for me to do career in this.
It was very interesting to know that so many reasons motivated you to take up the study and then a career in public policy. Of course, I completely agree with you that not only India, but the world is struggling to achieve its sustainable development goals. And because of COVID-19 situation, we are now completely off track when it comes to achieving those ambitious goals that were set for the year 2030. And it is truly inspiring that young professionals and the youth of this country is taking so much of interest in social problems which are pressing as well as immediate and require some innovative solutions coming out from within the country itself. That's really nice to know. So, you attended in the School of Government and Public Policy for a considerable amount of time. You spent time on Jindal campus, made friends, took mentorship from the faculty. So, how was your experience studying at Jindal, and how did it contribute towards your professional journey so far?
So it won't be wrong if I say Jindal School of Government and Public Policy was an eye opener for me. Although I applied few places, I got through TIS Hyderabad. But for two things, I had decided that I will come to JSGP. First and foremost is the faculty, and second the course structure. The advantage is that you are paying for one school and you are able to learn from other school also, and the kind of
Mhm.
highly qualified professor from India and abroad we have, the kind of infrastructure we have, the resources we have. So that was one reason for me to choose JSGP over TIS Hyderabad. And I can say that the person which I was in 2017 when I had interned in the campus, and after graduating, there is a drastic change. It is not only academically, personally also, I developed a lot myself with the help of professor and with the help of my, classmates. It is not that I got only academically and professional guidance. I got personal guidance also, which is very rare. But in my lifetime, I have never seen a professor those who are very accessible at any point of time, and they will go any beyond to help you and support you. That that I don't think I have never seen, as far as myself is concerned. I have never seen such a support, guidance, both academically, professionally, and professionally. And today, whatever I am doing in the area of public health, although just I today only I completed a year with IIT. So whatever I'm doing in this field, I think JSGP played a very important role, to shape my career in public policy and public health. And I wanted to, mention few names here, because of whom it won't be possible. First and foremost, of course, Dean R. Sudarshan, who spent, 25 years in UNDP, which is very remarkable. And his leadership and guidance, all personally, I have been benefited. And second is Professor Rajiv Malhotra, who have been the part of government, and he worked like anything. So getting his, I was following him since long back, and when I saw he is one of the faculty member in JSGP, I was like, okay, so let's have a face-to-face conversation. So I still remember my first day when the orientation happened on 1st August 2017. Soon after orientation, I knocked his office, And it was like, my dream is coming true. I was seeing him face to face, having a good amount of conversation. And for young professional like me, getting guidance from the person who spent more than 3 decades in the service with the government, that is not a easy job. And another person, which is my pillar, support, all weather mentor, comfort, you can say, is Professor Indranil Mukhopadhyay. His contribution to shaping my career in public health is can't be summarized in a paper in word. I I was working with him as a RA since second or third semester. Then I got a chance to work a project funded by JGU as a RA, and then after that he only what I should say, mm, gave me the
Showed your
path,
direction.
gave me the path and direction where I should go, what I should do, what I shouldn't do. And he is the person, I can say, was and is with me all the time. I can discuss with him anything and everything and to get the right guidance. So, the contribution of JSGP for my life is at this level, I can say.
That's so wonderful to hear that you were able to uh, take interest in as well as utilize the opportunities that were presented to you at the School of Government and Public Policy, and that you remember your professors so fondly, and that you continue to remain in touch with them. That is remarkable. So you are doing some exemplary work as a project and research associate at IITM, and congratulations, you just told us that you've completed a year. How has your experience been at, in delivering the roles and responsibilities of the position that you are at? And what do you look forward to in your professional journey?
Yeah, so this is very interesting, scenario when I got this opportunity. So at the same day, I got opportunity from Ministry of Commerce and Industries. I got the opportunity from PHFI, and I got the opportunity this IIT also. But when I came to know that Professor Indranil will be the co-supervisor, I declined those two opportunity and said yes to this project, because I have working with him very closely, so I know how much I will be benefited by working with IIT and with Professor Indranil. So it was like whatever I have learned in my classes and as working as a RA. So now for me it was like I will take this forward. Whatever I have learned, I will just take forward. So the project was happening in two states on which I was working. The project was to assess the reforms in PHC and different kind of models across the globe, and what can be best model can be implemented in India. And another aspect was to assess the newly implemented schemes called Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. One is insurance based scheme, another was the to create 1,50,000 health and wellness center. So we were assessing that also. So my role was reading documents across the globe. It could be national, international, assessing, evaluating, writing research report, policy brief, conducting meetings, dealing with the different stakeholder from district level to state level. So I was doing all kind of work, and we could
Hmm.
conduct interview only in Tamil Nadu. Unfortunately, we had submitted our request to Government of Haryana Health Department, Panchkula, but soon after the lockdown happened, so we could not conduct the our next step for that project.
Okay, that sounds really interesting and a lot of work that you were able to accomplish in a short span of time. And I hope that it continues further after the COVID-19 crisis settles down and there are certain government measures which are lifted. So that would be amazing it would be amazing to read your project report once it's ready. Uh, so what are some of the career opportunities that you think are available in the field of public policy in India and abroad? Because you and I both know that public policy, though has been around in India for a considerable amount of time, a career in public policy is something that still students think about a lot, and there are only a few places in India that you can actually go and pursue a career, study public policy properly, and then sort of embark on a career in public policy. So, what are your views in that?
So I would more focus on Indian context with respect to public policy. And I still remember when I got the offer from JSGP that I will be doing any public policy, except me, even in my family, no one was able to understand what is public policy. Then I told him, I convinced him, and then I am here today. And when I went back to my home after completing first semester, so I met few relatives and all. My father was very happy to introduce. So they asked me, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing MA public policy. He said, okay, it is related to something administration. I said, no, not related to administration. Then very fondly they said, okay, then you, I think you're in insurance-based policy. You're going, doorstep and selling insurance policy. So, so I was so surprised that this public policy domain is still developing. It is not came into the limelight like other subjects. If you take science, biology, engineer, and others, then people will know, oh, okay, you are doing something. If you take something like economics, or at least economics and this field, you will be say, okay, because I have personal experiences. So level of public policy is now developing slowly, and at least for a decade. By 2030, I am assuming that this will capture a large amount of space across, not only in India, across the globe. The work opportunity is very vast. Like we can work with consultancy firm in India and abroad. We can work with NGO. We can work with the government. Like you can see the young professional from Niti Aayog, and across the ministries they are hiring. And you can work with the international NGO. Like one of my friend was working with International Growth Center, and I work with Australian Council on a short-term project for 2.5 months. The opportunity is very large. Nowadays, even the government is outsourcing their some of the work to the private sector and big firm. So now they are creating a separate department for government and public policy. If you can see KPMG, Deloitte, everyone is creating a separate department for that. So the opportunity is very vast to work in public policy. And in coming days, especially I can see in social sector, the opportunity will be like anything.
Okay, that is interesting to know that public policy careers are up and coming in the Indian context. And if you arm yourself with a good degree in public policy, not only being aware of the contemporary issues of our times with the challenges, as well as the research writing and public speaking skills that are sort of required in professions today in the 21st century professions, you could really make a mark in the field of public policy.
And
Right?
I would
You
like
want
to
to
add,
contribute? Yes.
I would
Yes.
like to one more add thing. So now the importance of public policy and the public policy professional can be seen. Very recently, Government of India started lateral entry. So they are
Okay.
inviting application from the outside the non-IS cadre from the different fields. If you're expert in energy, if you're expert in education, if you're expert in agriculture. So now they are bringing from private sector to public sector. So now we can understood from this how much the public policy is keeping the importance and how much it will be there in coming days.
Definitely. And slowly and steadily, the government is also recognizing the importance of bringing in experts to solve issues which the government is struggling with, not only in India but worldwide, because of crunching budgets, because of because of the way resources are allocated, and also the ways in which problems have been tackled so far. So now let's get into the substantive topic for today's webinar, which is health laws in India, policy practice and implementation. So my first question to you, Vivekanand, really is, and I am very interested to know that can you briefly explain about the overall impact of COVID-19 on the Indian economy? That's a huge question, but we just want a snapshot of your views with respect to what are the likely consequences of this global pandemic on the Indian economy?
Yeah, so by giving the total overall impact will be like it will take even a month, because this COVID-19 impacted almost all the sectors, not only in India, across the globe. And when the countries like US, UK, and other major economies getting affected, it is bound that Indian economy will be affected. So I will give you a short brief, and I have few data
Sure.
which I will tell with your permission.
Please
So,
go ahead.
yeah, so according to ILO, or in International Labour Organization, it says about 40 crore. And before that, I want to add 90% of workforce is there in informal sector in India. Only 10% is working in formal sector. So according to ILO, out of 90 crore, 40% of person is going to lose their job for a longer period of time. And these are the worker who works in the informal sector. So that is one of the biggest, challenges would be there for the government even after the lockdown. It will be there for a longer period of time. And according to Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, they says unemployment rate will be rising something around 27.11%. And we know, according to current data, the unemployment rate is highest in last 46 years. It is up to the highest level up to the 46 years. So you can imagine how it will impact, and it is going to impact that 90% who works in the informal sector. And till May, I collected the data till May, almost around 84% Indians have seen fall in their income, and around 122 122 million more people is likely to be unemployed according to the data. So this is the snapshot, and everyone is talking like this industries will be affected, that industry will be affected. But the core issue is that these people has been hit very badly, and recovering, from this will be very harder. So this is the overall impact which I was able to collect.
Definitely, that's some very important statistics and really paints a very dark picture for the future of the Indian economy and its people. And what we could do is not to turn a blind eye to what is to come after the COVID-19 crisis, and already it has snowballed into an economic crisis, but to really take it head on and actively take measures to not eliminate, but at least mitigate some of the potential impact of the COVID-19 crisis. Yes.
And according to estimate by CII and IMF, it says that the GDP of India will be going down something between 4 to 4.5%. Now you can
That's
imagine.
very concerning. That is very concerning. In fact, if you look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals report of 2020, uh, there has been a taking of stock of what the countries are going through when it comes to poverty, healthcare, education, and it the statistics are alarming. They say that a number of people, about 800 million people, are going to be going to face hunger, going
That
to face food
that will
shortage.
come in my next, about.
Okay, then I'll leave it up to you. But they have some stark statistics about poverty in healthcare and are saying that decades of progress has been reversed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is concerning. So overall, Indian economy has gotten hit as the global economy has, but the unorganized sector workers have got hit more than anybody else. And the fact that employment opportunities are far and few in between, and in fact, a number of people are going to lose their jobs, which then has an impact on other aspects of their life. So, going forward, what is the status of the public health care system, or rather, what was the status of the public health care system before the COVID-19 pandemic? Do you want to paint a picture for that?
Yeah, so before going to that, I would like to mention two report which has been came into limelight, and one is about quality and accessibility of healthcare. So India has been ranked 145th out of 195 countries across the globe. And according to Global Health Security Index of 2019, when they are assessing how the especially public health system is ready to fight the pandemic like COVID-19, India scored 57th of 195 countries, and it scored 46.5, which is much lower than the Indonesia and Thailand. So these two reports came, which already raised the alarm. And to assess any, according to my analysis, to assess any public health system, we need to focus on how much government is spending and what is the status of infrastructure, especially in rural area. So according to National Health Profile 2019, India spent 1.05% of GDP on health, which is far behind the desirable expenditure, which is at least 6% of GDP. When it's come to bed per thousand population, data says India have 0.55 beds per thousand population. And if you see the state like Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and other states, it is among I think 12 states, which contribute 70% of population of India. They have less than the average, national average. So they have less than beds per thousand population. And if you talk about the physician per thousand population, India have 0.8, which is far behind the target set by WHO. And if you see about the shortfall of PHC and CHC in the state like Jharkhand, Bihar, and West Bengal, it ranges from 69 to 81%. So now you can imagine in these three states, if you talk about the shortfall of community health center and PHC health center, which is a very critical point for anyone to get the diagnosis, especially in rural areas, they have shortage of 69 to 81%. So now you can imagine the system which were already in fragile state. So now this pandemic, how this pandemic has impacted. So this is, I don't think any explanation is needed after this.
Exactly. I mean, you have really painted a picture which is concerning, but is also the truth, sadly, for the times that we live in. Uh, so there has been a response to the COVID-19 crisis by the government, and the public health care system has sort of adapted itself through the crisis to meet the demands of this unknown, uncertain, overwhelming pandemic. But what are your views in terms of the handling of the crisis by the public healthcare system for the general population? So, of course, you have private hospitals for people who can afford them. But what about the larger sections of the society, the marginalized and the vulnerable sections who are unable to afford private healthcare? How has the pandemic situation, how worse has it been for them? Yeah.
So before that, with your due permission, I wanted to share one picture which tells
Please
about
do.
the situation about the private healthcare during the
Please.
pandemic. One second.
Yes, sure.
Is it visible to everyone?
No, Vivekanand, we can't see the picture. You can share your screen. Did you share your screen?
Yes, yes, I did share the screen.
You have to open the picture as well. Keep the picture open on your laptop.
Yeah, yeah, I opened it is in front of my desktop.
Okay. Uh, Somehow we are not able to see it. If you can email it to me, I can try on my end.
Yeah, yeah, I am emailing you few pictures which you can show.
Sure. A word to the attendees, meanwhile, that once the presentation is over, we will be taking questions from the audience. And Mr. Vivekanand Saab would be more than delighted to answer your questions. It could be about the substantive areas of the topic that have been discussed for today, or the career-related questions when it comes to the field of public policy, or general comments and observations about maybe your views about the public healthcare system in India.
I have mailed you, ma'am.
Okay, I'm just going to look at it. Give me a second.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you send it on the alumni office ID?
No, the email ID which you say, send me the reminder. Shall I forward once again?
I didn't receive it.
1 second.
Vivekanand, if you don't mind, let's continue with the conversation, and you just send the email, and somewhere in between I will share it with everyone. Okay?
1
Just
second.
not keep everyone waiting.
I forwarded on alumni relation office mail.
Okay, I will download it, and meanwhile we could proceed with the question, the
Yeah,
answer
sorry,
to your question.
sorry for the delay. So yeah, even this general public has been affected. Even my own uncle, he has to go for dialysis twice in a week. So during the pandemic, he has been denied access by the private as well as the public hospital. But after having the heated argument, one of the public hospital, admitted for some time, and they asked him to leave as soon as possible. And there are few incidents which came into the limelight and appeared in the national newspaper. First thing is, the pregnant woman from Noida has been denied access from both the private as well as public hospital, and she died in the ambulance itself. In the first scenario. And second scenario, the state like Madhya Pradesh, who have the highest rate of maternal mortality according to latest report, in the month of April, there has been decline in public facilities delivery by 19%. And even the PMJY schemes, they their utilization has been hit very badly. In Assam, it is 75%, Maharashtra, it is 25%, Bihar also 25%. So, and they also deny access to the child delivery. So these are the, response from the hospital, because the poor people, once you download the pictures is there about the private hospital, the poor people can't even think about to go and get a treatment from private hospital. So they are completing depending on the government. And once and the response of government will be like this, then where the people will be going? So it is very obvious and very clear that public health system, the response from the public health system has not been up to the mark, by looking at the recent report which appeared in the media. And even WHO also confirmed that the people who are suffering from non-communicable diseases, they are at the higher risks by if they get response like this. And if you look at the disease surveillance team, which used to assess and monitor outbreak like this, they also don't give any data after February. So that also kept in the dark. So public response from public health facilities has been not up to the mark and not satisfactory.
Thank you for sharing that. And now I'm going to share the pictures because I have been able to download them. Okay, so there seems to be a problem with me sharing the pictures with the audience. I would request the IT team to sort of give me the access to share the pictures because I'm getting a error in doing the same. And probably later on we can show these pictures. Vivekanand, are you getting a similar error when it comes to showing the pictures? Because when I'm sharing my screen,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
able to do the same thing.
Yes, 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 ma'am.
Okay, so I think the IT rescue here. So the IT team kindly allow us to sort of share our screen, give us the access, and meanwhile we are moving to the next question. Uh, so
Your
system
voice,
when
your
it
voice, your voice is breaking, ma'am.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, now I am able to hear
So of course the system has not been satisfactory when it comes to dealing with cases in the COVID-19 situation. But there are certain vulnerable sections which have been more affected than the others, especially migrant workers and women. So could you summarize some of the significant issues that were faced by these sections of society when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic?
So there are a few pictures about the migrant worker also. So if it is now getting, if you are able to share that pictures.
Uh, I have not got the access from the IT. I'm waiting for them.
Okay, so yeah, so let's discuss it. First, I would like to say a few data about the migration. So according to 2011 census, almost 45.6 crores, all 38% of population was migrant. And according to latest data, 45, please make a note of it, 45 percent of the population are migrant in our country. So when the lockdown has imposed, and I don't know, what the policy maker have thought before implementing the lockdown just 4 hours before, although it is being debated whether imposing lockdown in a shorter period is bad or good. It is still subject of debate. But my own analysis says when you knew that 45% of migrant workers are workers are migrant, they are spread across the country. When they will be losing their job, losing their livelihood, it was bound that they will move out of the place. It was bound that they will move out of the place from the place to their hometown, and it was bound and it was expected. But I don't know how they failed to anticipate this scenario. See, migrant workers facing issue in for at all the front. And with respect to the issues faced by the women since the lockdown, it is not only in India, it is across the globe. And in India, it is called Silent Pandemic by National Commission for Women, and they received more number of complaints during pandemic than the normal days. They have to face issue like sexual harassment, mental harassment, physical harassment, and everything, and they have to bear that. So who will be the responsible for this? Because there is multiplier effect. If you are, doing mentally torture, sexually harassment, physical harassment, it is going to impact the whole family, including children. So
Definitely.
these issues has to be dealt with very seriously. We can't give the excuse like this is like suppose one pandemic is there, so we are not able to handle. It is a responsibility of the state to ensure the security and safety of the women, because it is in the constitution also allow the government to have the special provision to ensure the safety and security. So the total responsibility of the state.
Definitely, that was beautifully summarized by you that we have to take care of our vulnerable populations better, and especially migrant workers and women, because we could see that they were affected and are being affected in large numbers. I would just like to add my 2 pence here. When it comes to migrant workers, management could have been better, and it could have been planned in a better manner as opposed to what played out in the public eye. In terms of women, I'm so happy that you brought out the statistics from the National Commission for Women, because the silent pandemic is nothing else but domestic violence cases on the rise. because today women are trapped with the perpetrators themselves and do not have access to those formal and informal means of solving their issues within the family. So those are some things which are particularly concerning, and it has also been said that post the pandemic, the number of calls, a surge in domestic violence cases being reported is going to really shake up the system when it comes to implementation of women laws in India. Yes, yes, please.
And after this pandemic, or now it's getting serious normal, so it has to be seen how state is dealing with such kind of complaint which has been received. If they are not doing anything on this complaint which is very serious in nature, then people will think, okay, it is just like that. If something tomorrow also happening, such any outbreak and any pandemic, the people will repeat the same because they don't have any fear of law and government. So it has to be dealt with in very serious manner.
Yes, this is my area of research, and I've been working on for a couple of written a few articles on it as well. And in many countries, domestic violence has been listed as a essential service. Not domestic violence, sorry, violence survivors or victims of domestic violence. That kind of as an essential service to allow for their free movement. But in India, that has not been the case. Uh, Also, we have to come up with a preventive tool, a list of measures that can be taken in case a crisis hits us in the future. Rather than being uh, reactive to it, we have to be proactive in knowing what are the steps the victim can take when she's trapped in the situation in the house with the perpetrator. That's amazing. Now I'm able to share the picture, so I'm going to share it with the audience.
Please.
So this is one of the pictures.
So this picture I took because this reported in Indian Express on 6th or 7th July, and these pictures from one of the Bhagalpur district from Bihar. So the children, because Anganwadi center has been shut down, and the ASA worker and the Anganwadi center, workers have been asked to trace and tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and trace who was affected, who had symptoms and all. So these people, these children don't have any option rather than pick upping wraps from the street and other things, sell it for 10 rupees and 20 rupees to survive for a day. So from this picture, I wanted to draw the attention of everyone ki how severe issue is this. This is the one part which appear in the national media. So there could be many more. So the basic objective to bring this picture was to show how situation is severe if when it comes to the food security and nutrition. And I would like to request you to show that private hospital pictures.
Okay, all right. Is this okay? Would you like to speak about this?
So now I will give some data on this nutrition if you allow me.
Do you want me to share the other pictures as well? I'll quickly share them with you.
Yes, please.
Here it is.
So this is the
Are you able to see?
Yeah. So this is the menu chart of a reputed hospital in private sector. So now you can see the charge. So this is for COVID patient. This you can see the charge. This is called like menu. When you go to some big restaurant and you order this for this much, this is for this much. So I wanted to draw your attention, on this picture. If at all government response has been not very educated, if government has failed to deal with the crisis, now the private hospital taking this as opportunity to gain more money, and this rate has shown everything. So you can see the chart. So for general ward, it is like 2,50,000, 250 something like that, and there is 27,000. So do you believe the person who is earning, according to World Bank data, the estimated poverty level at 240 rupees per day? Those who are earning around 240 rupees per day, they are below that, they are poor. So do you think the people who are earning 240 rupees per day, according to estimate, and those who already lost their livelihood and work opportunity, do you think they will be able to match this rate even they sell everything from their house? So that is my objective to bring this picture.
Okay, so Do you want me to share the other pictures as
Yeah,
well?
you share all the other picture at first in one round, then I will explain.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just sharing it.
So this appear in Bareilly. So the migrant worker who were, moving out of their place to go back to their native place, they has been disinfected with the chemicals which we used in floor cleaning. Quote unquote, listen this word, the chemical which used to disinfect in that we use for the floor cleaning. So you can see how the migrant workers has been treated during the pandemic and how has been the response of the government. And you can show two others pictures.
Yes, just doing that.
And these are the some pictures which I took it from the national newspaper. It shows ki how migrant worker moving out of their our place to reach their native by any means, by by bus or train, by any means. And earlier I wanted to make this point also. Earlier, none of the government have responded very quickly to deal with this crisis when it came at extreme point, and when the honorable Supreme Court had to intervene and pull the leg of the government and ask them to be ensure that all the migrant worker who is willing to travel back to their native place, they should reach safely and securely. If that is not happening, then we will take the action. So after the intervening by the Supreme Court, then only government woke up and did something for migrant workers. You can,
I
yeah.
think Vivekanand, you have already covered this point. Let's move on to the
Yes,
next.
yes, yes.
Thank you for sharing such pictures with us, and they really put things in perspective. Now, let's move on to the next question and understand a few more things. You aren't able to see my screen now, right?
No,
My
no, no, no.
screen
That
sharing has stopped. Yeah.
that is fine.
So the next question really is that what do you think was the status of nutrition levels in the country before the COVID-19 pandemic?
So yeah, with your due permission, I would like to share some correct data.
Yes, please do.
In front of everyone. So according to National Family Health Survey for latest data 2015 and 16, over one third of all children under 5 are stunt, which means they have low height for their age. Every fifth child is wasted, which means they have low weight for their height. And more than 50% of children, this data is before pandemic, more than 50% of children are suffering from anemia. And the organization like UNICEF already ranked India is one of the highest stunt and wasted children have children across the world, and they rank 10th and 70th respectively. According to Global Nutrition Report, India has almost one third, means 30% of world stunt children. So it shows how we were doing before pandemic. And when the pandemic broke out, which I shows the pictures about the children who were picking wrappers from the street and setting for their survival. And during the pandemic, when it started, several international agencies said, first of all, the target which had been set, to reduce the malnutrition from the globe by to 5% by 2025, that is surely going to miss. That is not going to achieve at all in this scenario. And they also mentioned that SDGs 2 and SDGs 3 will be lagging behind. They have the goal by 2030 will be achieving, and it is highly impossible that especially government like India is going to achieve such target. And before pandemic, according to Tendulkar committee report, before pandemic, 56 people were poor. 56 crore people were poor before pandemic, and 20 crore people are such people. They have income level just 100 or 200 above the poverty line. So if we put together more than around 80 crores people were already poor before the pandemic. So now they lost their job, now they lost their livelihood. So now you can imagine what would be the situation of the nutrition and food security for those who belong to these categories. And there is two alarming reports which came into the very recently. One is by Lancet study, which is very reported journal. It says daily 1,934 children under age 5 dying every day in India, and as much as 7,60,000 more death could be addition to this, and COVID-19 will be the one of the major contributor. And another report of Food and Agriculture Organization said most of the Indian is not able to afford a balanced diet. So now these two reports, is the, what I should say, the alarming level which government has to be serious on this. And still I am not finding any concrete step on that, except the state like Kerala who started delivering the cooked meal to every household, those who were enrolled in the Anganwadi center and all. So except Kerala, none of the state have responded very well to ensure the level of food security and balanced diet. And there are already reports by, it is not our report. This is international agency report like UNICEF, Lancet, and Food and Agriculture Organization. So by looking at this report, and I showed the pictures also, so you can imagine the situation of nutrition before pandemic and how it would be after pandemic. So it's very
Definitely.
clear.
So it has impacted nutrition levels to a great extent, and also as a country, we haven't invested enough mind, resources, intellect into increasing the nutritional status of our people, which has then attracted a lot of diseases and problems and stress on the public health system, healthcare system. And of course, the basis of it is not only access to resources, but awareness, affordability, as well as the gender dynamics when it comes to the nutritional status in our country. Yes,
And I said the government said that they increased the wage for Manrega, which is Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And earlier it was 182 rupees. Now they increased 102, just 20 rupees. 20 rupees for 80 crores people who already fall in the mm,
below poverty line.
below poverty line. And the World Bank estimate is that those who are earning up to 240, they are not poor, and they are also going to miss the target, and maybe more people, as much as 104 million more people is it other estimate till May. So they 104 million people is likely to fall into poverty line. So by increasing 20 rupees from 180 to 200 rupees, what are you trying to give to the poor and the migrant who return from the other places to their native?
Definitely, that's not going to lead to any significant improvement in their life. So, having the background and the knowledge of what the situation of the public healthcare system and nutrition was before the pandemic and what it has come out to play after the pandemic, what do you then think is the government's approach, or should be the government's approach for the public healthcare system in a post-COVID-19 world? We know that we are not there yet. We are still within the storm of the crisis as humanity, but we also have to quickly start thinking about a situation where the COVID-19 crisis would have settled down a bit. Then what should the government do? What would be the lessons from this entire episode for the government to bring some improvements in the public healthcare system for the larger populations in our country?
Yeah, so first and foremost things which I have think that they need to start building the infrastructure, especially PHC and CSC in rural India. By leaving all other things, they must not should they must build the infrastructure, especially PHC and CC in rural India. It will have two impact. First, it will create the job for the people who return from the other place to their native, and second, it will boost the economy, and they have a better infrastructure. The first thing is that. And for building the infrastructure, they need financial resources, obviously. And as I mentioned earlier, they spend 1.05% of GDP, but desirable is 6%. So what government can do is they can spend at least 3% in medium term, and then slowly they can increase to 6% in upcoming in longer term, which is the desirable. And now this is the right time, for the government to implement the idea of universal health care, health coverage, and right to health. If you see the document of WHO and UNICEF of 2000, they mention very specifically that PHC and CHC will be the tool to implement the idea of UHC. So this is a very right time to implement the idea of universal health coverage. Second, they need to ensure the level of food security and nutrition security at any cost, or else we could see another health disaster in the country. This is very not far. If we go in this speed, another health crisis is not very far. And last but not least, they need to maintain the supply chain. So these are the immediate approach which government has to be would have taken, but still there is lagging behind. I could find state like only Kerala who has started delivering cooked meal to every household to have a balanced diet and to tackle the issue of malnutrition. So I think that Kerala model can be implemented in the other state also. So these are the immediate steps which government must take immediately.
Okay, thank you so much, Vivekanand, for such remarkable inputs on the various questions that we had about the public healthcare system as well as the nutritional status of India and the way forward for the government to start amending the way in which the public healthcare system operates, and also to do something about the highest levels of malnutrition that this country is facing. With that, we will move on to the questions that we have received. We have received a number of questions from the audience, and we would try and answer each one of them. One of the attendees who is anonymous has asked of you, Vivekanand, that how would a sustainable USC policy be feasible when doctors need to be paid as much as they are for their skills?
Can you repeat the question, ma'am?
How would a UHC policy be feasible when doctors need to be paid as much they are as per their skills? So it's talking about the doctor's fee and the feasibility of the UHC policy.
Yeah. So as of now, if you see the per capita expenditure by government of India, they are spending 16 US dollars, and in US this is around 3,000 something. So you can see the difference. So that is why I said to implement the idea of UHC, and this is the right time. And for that, the first and foremost thing required is the financial resources. Financial resources for infrastructure and for the qualified work, health worker. It could be doctor, it could be nurses. And I would like to mention 2 points. So in Maharashtra, those who were the front end workers working in the BMC, when they tested positive, they denied the access, and at last they lost their life. In Bihar, the junior doctors from Patna Medical College and nurses said openly that they are not going to the war, and they are going to have the revolt if they are not paying on time on sufficient amount of money. So to implementing the idea of UHC, the first and foremost thing that government should have adequate financial resources.
Okay, that is a wonderful response. One of our colleagues from Zindal Global Law School and alumni, Ms. Arunima Saraf, has a question for you. So she's asking that has this pandemic brought about a hope for the Indian healthcare sector to improve on the facilities aspect? So do you think there is a ray of hope for improvements in the public healthcare system, knowing the consequential impacts of not investing enough towards the development of public healthcare?
So yeah, so this is very interesting question, and I wanted to say, so when the government announced the reforms packages, so-called Atmanirbhar Bharat and self-reliant, whatever so may be. So obviously I belong to health domain, so I will firstly see what has been allocated to the health sector. So I was going through the series of reforms, how many this sector received this much, this sector received this much, but I was so surprised, and it shocked my mind. So this happened because of this is the health issue and happened because of, and government is not able to tackle this issue because of lack of resources, infrastructure and financial resources. But I fail to find out even a single solid and concrete policy how government is doing to deal with in this pandemic in incoming days. Having said that, I also believe this is not a first and last outbreak which happened. It could be in future also. So there is not concrete plan and policy to deal with this kind of pandemic. Leave the pandemic. Even they don't have any, I was going through the health policy 2017. They said they will expend 2.5% of GDP. So where it is? This is still we have 1.05. And if you see the current government, I was going through data, they reduced the budget of NHM 20%, and they and ICDS, the Integrated Child Development Service, by 10%. So by looking after this data and by looking after the reforms which have been announced by the central government, I could not find any solid proposal. These are the proposal which were going to implement step by step and to deal with this crisis. So I would say, but looking at the current scenario, I am also hopeless that there would be any rapid changes in health sector, especially in public healthcare sector. I can say. I hope I answered to that
At least
question.
they're not steps. Yes, I think you did a beautiful job in doing that. I think as of now it doesn't seem a possibility, but hopefully our policymakers will wake up to the crisis and draft policies which are a little more futuristic. Another of our attendees, Sandeep Saha, has asked you a question, and the question goes as: We have been, we have seen the healthcare system is crippling in India, especially in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there is acute shortage of professional healthcare practitioners, and also the healthcare infrastructure is not completely equipped to deal with the crisis. So, under this scenario, do you think we need to recognize and train informal healthcare providers and give them a sort of formal certificate to treat primary health diseases?
Yeah, that is what I said. Even the ASA worker and in Bihar and Anganwadi center worker, those were demanding the equal wages for equal pay. They have been not be, they are facing some issue for this. They are not having adequate resources, but they are doing the same job the permanent employees are doing. So this is correctly right time to identify the people from out of the government sector and other sector, train them. If they are already trained, then utilize their service and pay them very well. And in the beginning itself, I mentioned the government started lateral entry into the non from non-IS cadre. So this
I, yeah.
so this can be implemented at the ground level also. It can be implemented at the lowest level also. Then only this kind of issue will be dealt with very seriously. So of course, yeah, government must see this option also.
That's amazing. So another of our attendees, Preetham Thakur, asked a question of you. With the entire poor healthcare system in India, even before the pandemic, how do you see the government's decision on the entire Unlock 4.0 move, taking into consideration around 80 crore people falling below the poverty level or on the borderline poverty and around 80,000 people getting affected by COVID on a daily basis? What is your take on it? What shall be the appropriate policy decision?
So unlock for yeah. So see, because government also don't have any other. Hello.
Yes, we are able to hear you,
Okay.
Vivekanand.
So yeah. So government also don't have any other option because they don't have fund to deal with the crisis. See, state like Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, MP, Haryana, they are they don't have sufficient fund, and then they don't have any other option to allow the activities step by step. But at the same time, they should also make sure that more people is not falling into the poverty or into the COVID-19 situation. But state are also helpless. And when I talked about the finance, there is a debate for last 1.5 months. The payment from the central government. their due from GST. So these things also should be taken into the account, because the state are helpless. They don't have any other resources. So how they will pay for their basic necessities and basic expenditure which has to be occurred. If they are not paying to the person who are the frontline worker, they won't come for the work, which happen in state like Bihar. So state, and there is a lack of coordination between central government and state government at some point of time, and because of that lack of coordination, people are suffering. Having said that, unlocking 4.0 is the what I should say is, government didn't have any other option, so they are allowing activities to move step by step.
Sure, that is an amazing answer. Now, moving on to Vinay Vishwanathan's question, he's asked of you that would it not be fair to attribute the current healthcare prices to historically consistent government-funded insurance or subsidies? Because what he feels is that COVID-19 alone is not to be blamed, and would like to know your views regarding the same.
Yeah, that is what I compared the health system before the pandemic and after the pandemic. So, and hardly 10 to 16% people have the insurance, that also from the private. So, and in 2015 draft policy of health of central government says that we are moving from market-based insurance to state fund insurance. But the same government, when by Niti Aayog in 2017, they diluted that draft, and they said no, market-based insurance scheme is fine, like US. So state funding insurance is very much necessary to deal with the pandemic, such like that. Yeah, of course, COVID-19 is not wholly responsible, but COVID-19 had taught many things, and it has shown the way that our policy has to be revisited. We can't simply sit at one place and just copy paste the draft after draft after draft. This has to be revisited. And if you have, suppose if people who have social security before that pandemic, they would have easily deal at least for some time. There won't be any debt, and there won't be any much more poverty. Yeah, of course, COVID-19 can't be blamed solely, but COVID-19 is an opportunity for the government to revisit the policy of, especially for the health and social security scheme, and because hardly 10 to 16% people have the insurance in country. We have population for more than 130 billions, and out of that, hardly 10 to 16% have the health insurance. So you can imagine the situation.
So, I mean, that is quite concerning, and thank you for throwing some light on the situation. Now, Shrishti Rastogi has a question for you. Understanding the existing public healthcare conditions in India that has been further perforated by COVID-19, how do you think the PHC or the CHC should respond in order to shift the knobs of impact at grassroots level without affecting the usual affairs of the healthcare services there?
Yeah, very good question, and I also believe that PHC and CHC is a very much important and tool to deal with any crisis. So when I was doing research on my project, which is all about PHC, so I did I did the analysis from fifth 5-year plan to 12th 5-year plan of with respect to PHC, and if I say that there is a common issues which have been raised in all policy documents from 5th to 12th: shortage of doctors and nurses, infrastructure, and finance. So these three, what I should say, very big important issues which have been addressed plan by plan by plan, but nothing concrete on the ground has been taken. And during my talk, I also mentioned that the WHO and UNICEF also said that without having a strong PHC and CHC, we can't achieve any, UHC and health for all and right to health in any manner. So by giving more power and by giving more power in form of decentralization to the PHC and CHC, we can curb the diseases like non-communicable diseases and other pandemics such as COVID-19. And I also wanted to point out, I had to chance to travel to the Kerala and Tamil Nadu, where we visited, how their Panchayati Raj institution is functioning very closely. We met representatives from the lowest level to the highest level, and we tried to see why people always talk about the Kerala model and Tamil Nadu model if it comes to the health. So we have seen how they are functioning. There is proper decentralization of power in terms of finance, in terms of resources. So until unless we are not decentralized power from central to the lowest level, until unless we are not providing the proper financial resources to the PHC and CSC, until unless we can't deal with such a crisis like COVID pandemic. And this is another estimate by Ministry of Family and Welfare. It says government of India need 2.1 lakh crore rupees to strengthen the PHC in next 5 years. So from where they are going to get the resources? They have all the available data, they have all the evidence resources, but how they are going to implement and how they are going to execute, that is not at all clear. So my point is, without having decentralization and without having proper financial resources to CHC and PHC, it is going to affect all aspects of health system.
Of course, and that is something important and to be paid attention to. One of the other attendees, Ms. Palak Sarkar, has asked of you that why don't we go and replicate the healthcare models of Finland and such other countries? Or is our population too big to replicate such methods? And an added question is that how important is access to education in these times so that more and more people are aware of these challenging scenarios?
Yeah, so see, we simply can't copy paste the model from the other countries. Other countries socioeconomic demographic is different, and our socioeconomic demographic is totally different. So, and one size cannot fit to everyone. So while yeah, we can study that model. For example, when I was studying the model of PHC across the world, I have seen the country like Thailand, Brazil, Costa Rica, Sri Lanka. They all have adopted, from the grassroots level, from CHC, PHC, and all, and they have they decentralized their power to the health community and community participant. So we simply can't copy paste. Yeah, we study their model, and we can implement the similar model in India based on their socio and economic demographic, because we can't simply what I should say, because we have very university and diversity we have. It is not possible to implement the same policy which have in other country. We can take the lesson from them and we can implement in our own way. And yes, access to education, when I mentioned socioeconomic demographic and indicators, it includes education also. And education plays a very important role. Until unless we don't have about education, we can't understand about anything. Suppose, for example, when I was doing my dissertation and I was looking to the access to the antenatal care, and I found that the women which had the less education and no education, they were not aware and they are not were able to access the antenatal care services. At the same time, the women who had the education till higher secondary level and beyond that, they were able to access more than 50% of antenatal care service. So education play a very important role while accessing the service either from the private or the government.
Okay. Thank you for those enlightening statistics. Now, Vinay Vishwanathan had asked you a question about the UHC, and he has a follow-up question now, and many others have also asked a follow-up question on the UHC. So, according to them, do you believe our government has the required funds to pay specialists consistently for quality care? Why shouldn't we fully privatize the medical sector? That way, hospitals would be forced to price as per consumer per capita income trends, as opposed to public sector funding with taxpayer backing. How would you respond to this critique?
First of all, I don't agree on the point which the attendee said. Why can't we privatize the healthcare sector? It can't be. In the country like India, if you're talking about the privatization of the healthcare, it is not at all possible. Uh, Having said that, I mentioned around 70 to 80% of the people are poor, and their estimates have been 240 rupees per day. So by privatizing, even yeah, so privatizing is not an issue, to deal with the crisis. Having said that, if you are aware about the Prime Minister Jan Arogya Yojana, which is insurance-based scheme, and even that scheme only tertiary and secondary and tertiary sector has been covered. Primary sector has been completely ignored. So from the public money, they are giving money to the private sector to get the benefit about the service. But that also very limited. And very recently, they had detected number of service. So my point is that health and education, which is a public good, shall and must be the responsibility of the government. It cannot be privatized also, because when we say the why can't be privatized, we have to see any private sector will enter into the agreement only and only when they see the profit, and their prime motive is to earn profit. So we can't simply hand over the health sector to the privately. Even now, around 70% outpatient and 60% inpatient has been treated in private hospital. And under PMJY also during the lockdown, they denied their access from in both public and private. So it is not at all possible, to privatize the healthcare system. And even thinking about this, according to me, is very dangerous.
That is a very strong viewpoint, and you backed it up with some solid reasons. That's all the time we have for the questions from the audience. I have one last question for you, Vivekanand. That if somebody is embarking on this journey of developing their career in the field of public policy, somebody who is studying or aspiring to study public policy, what would your advice be to an aspirant to develop a successful career in the field of public policy, such as you?
So I don't think that I am that much experienced and well knowledge person to give advice to the people who are aspiring to become a public policy professional. Although I can share my personal experience, which can be benefited or not. See, first they should have the interest in this field, and second they need to target one policy wing. So when we see the public policy, there are multiple branches. So they need to target one policy aspect. Suppose I did for health, someone will do for education, someone will do for poverty and education, and other. So they need to target one specific sector, and they have to proceed with that, because when we study one sector, it is bound that we will be study other sector also. So when we study suppose health, we are bound to study about level of education. We are bound to study what is the poverty level. We bound to study how out of pocket expenditure, how is impacting people, and how poverty level impacting quality of health. So they need to focus on one area, and then they can build their they need to focus on one area as a foundation, their base in public policy field, and then they can study multiple branches also. But they need to have a solid background in one aspect, because why I'm telling, I have been giving interviews to so many places before joining IIT, and they were saying, okay, you did public policy, you did this much work, that is all fine, we appreciate. But tell me one aspect that in which you are very not very much experienced. At least you have a strong viewpoint. You have some good amount of knowledge. You studied something more about that as compared to other subject in public policy. Because if you study public policy, we can't have a specialization in every subject, because very diverse. So my advice is with that, first they need to have interest to pursue public policy, and suppose they need to keep some patience, because while you enter into public policy, and it's a very new field, so it might take some time to settle it down. But I am sure in coming days there will be lot opportunity. And third advice would be focus on one particular aspect of the policy, and then you build different branches of the policy.
That is some really valuable advice. You need to. It's times where expertise and specialization is something that is of more demand as opposed to a generalized knowledge. Of course, you should have generalized knowledge, but you should also focus on a particular area and develop your strength in that area. Yes, please.
So when we study public policy, which means we already built the general idea we already built in our background. Now our job would be take it from there to the next level. So
Exactly.
when we study health or when we study education, we went about poverty. So we will come to know what the economics has to role to play, what the environment has to play, what the other political will has to play, what the judiciary has a role to play. So automatic when you build the specialization, other branch the way or the road will other branches will automatically will open to you.
Sure. So with this, we are ending today's webinar. But before we end today's webinar, I would like to thank you, Mr. Vivek Nanja, for coming and sharing that gamut of information that you have acquired over the years, your expertise, your knowledge, as well as your practical application experiences with the health sector. You have not only enlightened us about the public healthcare system, but also about nutrition levels and access to education before, during, and after the COVID-19 crisis. And you have been gracious enough to even answer questions from the audience that range from government measures to the measures that citizens and community should take in order to develop a strong public health infrastructure in this country. So we as OPs in the Global University are proud of you that you have acquired so much of knowledge and you've come and shared it with the larger community in your field and area of work. So we welcome you to keep coming back with more of such webinars and enlighten us about the contemporary debates and issues of our times. Thank you so very much. And thank you to the audience for being so patient and for being so wonderful and engaging with our speaker today by way of questions. Next week also we'll be having a webinar on Monday 5 to 6:30 p.m. and the details will be shared on our social media pages. Thank you so much. Vivekanand, would you like to add something?
Yes, yes. First of all, I would like to thanks to have such a good host like you, and thanks Alumni Relation Office and JSGP and JGU for giving me this opportunity. I always feel proud when I say that I pass out from this institution, and as you know, I'm living very near to the university, so I always go and come back to university because I have a very the attachment to the university. So that, and I would like to thanks all of them who have attended and asked the question, and I hope that I tried my level best to answer them. Although I'm not expert, I just share my experience and whatever I have gathered information. So thanks all, thank you so much.
It was definitely a very informative session and very engaging. I myself became very interested in the topic, and you answered those questions beautifully. Thank you for doing that. Have a nice evening, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.